What's the deal with a ketogenic diet and athletic performance? That's a hot topic that's actually kind of controversial because there's evidence on both sides of the story of whether it helps or hurts or even has no impact whatsoever. So let's get into this a little bit more because a new study may add a little clarity. I'm Dr. Brett Scher, the medical director at DietDoctor.com, and I recently wrote a post that we have at DietDoctor.com about an article that shows that in 10-kilometer and 20-kilometer race walkers, after 3.5 weeks of a keto diet, performance actually goes down, which is interesting, right? If you're an athlete who's competing in an endurance event like that, you want to know that. But that goes against sort of, I guess you could say, anecdotal experience of people like Zach Bitter, who's just smashing world records while following a ketogenic diet. Although his are, 100-mile races, so a much different event than that 10 or 20-kilometer event. And reports of someone like Chris Froome, who won a couple Tour de France's reportedly while following a ketogenic diet. So what's the deal? I mean, is it truly helpful or harmful? And the more important question is, though, does it matter? Because I think for most of us watching this video, going on Diet Doctor, most of us considering a low carb or ketogenic diet, we're not competitive athletes. So whether our performance changes by, 2%, 4%, does it really make a difference? And that's sort of the bigger question. But from a science standpoint, and if you are a competitive athlete, this study was really interesting. So Louise Burke from Australia is a researcher who a couple of years ago published a study looking at race walkers and the impact of selecting people for a sort of regular high carbohydrate diet or ketogenic diet. And she found that the people on the ketogenic diet dramatically increased their fatty acid oxidation, their ability to burn fat for fuel, which makes total sense, but at a higher cost, that it required more oxygen to do so, and their race times actually went down. Well, there was quite a bit of pushback against this article about sort of the methods she used, how she designed the trial, and what outcomes she measured and how she measured them. So to her credit, she said, okay, let's do it again. And confirmation studies are so important in the medical literature. They're often not done because they're not as sexy as sort of an original finding, and they're harder to get published also. But confirmation studies are so important. So to her credit, she said, let's do it again. And she set out to address a lot of the controversy from the first study. And what did she find this time? The exact same thing. So it was 3.5 weeks of a ketogenic diet, and then competing in a 10K race, and then later a 20K race. And she found that times decreased by about 2.5% on the keto diet, and those who were following the high carb diet, following the same training program, improved their performance by about 4.5%. So it was a pretty big difference. Now, a big difference if you are a competitive athlete who just changed your diet 3.5 weeks ago to a ketogenic diet. All right, so that's the caveat of any trial like this, is there's a specific protocol that was followed, and that's what it applies to. Would this apply to a competitive athlete who's been ketogenic for years? That's unknown. But if you look at doctors Finney and Volek, who basically know more about this than anybody in terms of the low-carb world, they've often said it can take up to 6 months to fully adapt athletically to a ketogenic diet. Now, that's not based on science as far as I know. I think that's mostly just based on their clinical experience. But what competitive athlete is going to have the patience to wait 6 months anyway? I mean, if your identity depends on being as fast and as competitive as possible, then having to wait 6 months or having a decrease in your performance by 2%, that's a big deal. But is that you? Does it apply for most people? I don't think so. So here's another way to look at the question. Does a potential small offset in athletic performance, is that outweighed by the potential other benefits you get from a low-carb or keto diet? For me, the answer is definitely yes. And I know for a lot of the patients I see and a lot of our visitors at Diet Doctor, the answer is yes, because we may be physically active, we may be competing with our friends, we may be competing with ourselves, but the loss of 2% of performance in light of all the benefits we can get really doesn't mean much. Look, I still like competing with my friends when I go mountain biking. I like seeing them get dusted behind me on the hills, right? And I can still do that low carb or keto. Maybe I could do even better if I was eating carbs, but to me, that's not important. And so I guess we have to all ask ourselves that same question. What's more important? So I like to look at this as, for this subset of people, if you are an endurance race walker or an endurance athlete about the same distance of the 10 or 20K race walk, then maybe it's not a good idea to switch to a ketogenic diet thinking it's going to improve your performance. This study says it isn't, but let's see if that applies to you first before reacting to it. All right, I hope that made sense. You can go over to dietdoctor.com, check out the article with a link to the study to learn more. Make sure you click thumbs up if you thought this was helpful and the subscribe button so you'll get all our updates here at the Diet Doctor YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everybody.